regarding salt. Salt on with bad food and with good foods. A lot of times I feel like I think I'm eating healthy, but I notice my guacamole from Whole Foods has salt. My salsa has salt. My dehydrated flax crackers have salt. My chickpea croquettes that are dehydrated have salt. And my sauerkraut has salt. And I tell myself that it's okay because I'm eating a lot of healthy things, and somehow I've justified that salt's okay. So 1, salt on healthier diets, and 2, salt in fast food. How should we? How should we? You're saying be careful with animal products. How should we think about salt, both on the healthy diet and on the unhealthy diet?
I challenge most of the health people on this one, frankly, because all of these salts, even with fancy names, Celtic salt, crystal salt, are sodium chloride. Now, we can't change that. Sodium chloride is sodium chloride. I don't care if you get it from the ocean or below the ground in Arkansas where there's salt mines, or if you get it from somebody ohming in Russia in a cave on this. Sodium chloride is not a healthy salt. Although sodium, without it, we die. It's actually what is the antiseptic for your lymphatic fluid. So we need it, but you should get it through food, and that would be my first choice. Now, we use salt when people they're getting weak and their electrolytes go down, and often when we're IVing whole food supplements into them. So we actually use crystal salt. The same thing I'm telling you is bad for you.
I agree with what you just said, the fact that all these sodiums, where you get them from, still expose you to an excess amount of sodium. But let me address one aspect to your question. Because let's say you're eating healthier. Does that make the salt less damaging? Because salt, excessive amounts of sodium, no matter where its source is coming from, excessive amount of any type of salt, can cause microvascular hemorrhaging and increase the risk of autoimmune conditions. It's pro-inflammatory. What I'm saying right now is it damages the endothelial of your lining of your blood vessels, weaken the structural foundation of your blood vessels, predisposing them to having a hemorrhage and a hemorrhagic stroke, and not dependent on your blood pressure. I'm saying salt damages people by raising blood pressure, and blood pressure damages brain cells, increases the risk of heart attacks and strokes. But I'm also saying salt directly damages the endothelium outside of its effect on raising blood pressure. Now, why is it that people with lower cholesterol have higher rates of hemorrhagic stroke? Why is it that people in Asian countries have higher risks of hemorrhagic stroke and lower rates of ischemic or embolic stroke, which is caused by a clot or the same things that cause a heart attack? And the answer is because when you eat the cheese and the burgers and the meats that increase your risk of atherosclerosis and increase your risk of having a heart attack or an embolic stroke, it thickens the blood vessel wall with atherosclerosis, protecting the fragile blood vessels in the brain from the effects of having a hemorrhagic stroke. What I'm saying right now is a person on a healthy diet or a vegan type diet lowers their risk of heart attacks and ischemic or embolic strokes, but if they're still eating a significant amount of salt, they can be at a significant increased risk of hemorrhagic stroke over the person who eats meat. So now what we've done in the Asian populations, who are high salt consumers, is we've lowered the rate of heart attack and increased the risk of stroke to make up for the people that are not dying of heart attacks. So their overall lifespan is just as bad as there is in America. And what we're doing among certain vegan populations is reducing the risk of embolic stroke and increasing the risk of hemorrhagic stroke because they're still eating a lot of salt in your diet. I propose that salt is more dangerous to a vegan than it is to a meat eater because your blood vessels are not going to be coated with a plaque and thickening
no
that can protect them from
agents,
hemorrhage.
No protecting
right,
agents,
there's no protection. Right. So why not protect against all these diseases? And when you're on a low salt diet chronically, or taking less than 1,000 a day or something from what natural foods give us, natural food gives us about 500 to 700 a day. You have a couple of hundred extra, you're still under 1,000. When you're on that low salt diet, your body learns to hold on to sodium. It doesn't excrete it in the urine, it doesn't excrete it in the sweat. And now when you're running marathons or playing tennis in the heat, so you're not pushing out salt, and your body is more stable. Your salt doesn't fluctuate up and down. And then when you don't eat salt, your taste gets stronger for salt. Now, lettuce tastes better, and vegetables have more flavor.
Celery,
Right, and so you can taste the natural flavors of food. People are used to eating a lot of salt. Nothing has any taste anymore, and they have to salt things to get flavor. And I'm saying it didn't increase your pleasure. All that salt eating has lessened your ability to enjoy the subtle flavors in natural foods that are so much stronger when your taste is not deadened by so much sodium.
Remember, before we had refrigeration, which wasn't long ago, they used to preserve meats with salt. So this is part of why we got into this process.
And a lot of our guests comes in with low sodium and low chloride. Like in a blood test, you should be like 135 and up with sodium. A lot of people come in like 129. And then you think, you need salt. No. And so our experience is these people have used a lot of salt in their diet before they came. And they're not able to detoxify. They're not eliminating like they should. And then we don't give them salt, but they get a lot of sodium in the juices, or it's celery, all the vegetables and seaweeds and things like that. By the time we have in the next blood test, they have perfect sodium.
Can I help you with that just for a second?
Yeah.
I think I can help you. Is that, because I've seen this and tested it over years with people in blood tests, is that when you're consuming a high amount of salt, let's say 3,000 to 4,000 a day, your body has to keep homeostasis by keeping the sodium in the bloodstream content consistent, so your urine gets trained and learns how to excrete a huge amount of sodium.
Yes.
And your sweat is excreting sodium, and your respirations are excreting sodium as well. So your body is pushing out sodium all the time. When this person goes from a high sodium diet immediately to a very low sodium diet, their kidney and their urine and their sweat and their breath is still secreting high amounts of sodium, and they'll become hyponatremic. Their sodium will become too low. It takes weeks for the body to learn how to hold on to sodium. And the same thing is true the opposite with me. I don't eat hardly any sodium. If I go to have some Chinese restaurant or eat an olive or something with sodium, my body's not used to excreting the sodium. I'm holding on to my sodium. Now that's what really good health is. You hold on to these, because when you're holding on to sodium, you're maintaining your electrolytes in your body, and with the sodium, you're saving the mineral content of your body. You're not using it and requiring so much. But in any case, the point I'm making is there's a temporarily lowering of the sodium when people switch from a high sodium diet to a very low sodium diet, and sometimes you have to take it down more gradually, or you have to give it to tell them they're going to be okay and reassure them. They can be feeling a little weak for a week or so, but it does resolve itself with time, and your body accommodates and gets used to the amount of sodium you consistently consume.
I think what we need to do is when people get married, put sodium in both of them so they stick together.
Okay, can I take one of the microphones to give to the audience?
Surely.
You guys okay, so please just ask one question, no follow-up, and I'd prefer not to be a health consultation, just ask a direct question of the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, your thoughts about vaccinations across the age spectrum, please.
Well, we have 4 children, 7 grandchildren. We chose not to vaccinate any of our children. Our children chose not to vaccinate. The most important book I've read on the subject out of dozens and dozens of books was authored by Robert F. Kennedy, Jr., who's an environmental attorney, but it was really put together by a Harvard and a Tufts University physician. It's called Ethyl Mercury, and I think anyone should read it. It was a very quick read. I thought it would take 3 weeks to read it. I read it in a few hours. So it's very concise, and what I love about it, they're not saying I'm anti-vaccines. What they're saying is, by the way, why don't we make vaccines that don't have ethyl mercury, that don't have aluminium in it? And because vaccines it's a double-edged sword. There's no question it saved millions and millions of people's, maybe billions of people's lives, and there's no question it's implicated with some disorders today.
Well, look, I mean, it's well known among scientists and physicians and researchers that every medical intervention has risks associated with it. You don't get something for nothing. There's risks. And the problem is, in one of the major problems in the medical profession is that the drug company studies don't look at long-term risks. They only consider immediate or short-term risks. So there's so much about so much potential risk in vaccine that nobody is looking at. The combining of 21 vaccines in the first 6 months of life, and whether that increases autoimmune disease or cancer risks 20 years later or in the teenage years. So in other words, there's so much about vaccines that we don't know. We really can't accurately ascertain the risks, because in this country, nobody's putting money to look at that and to see what the real benefit versus risk ratio.
But nowhere, not only this
No.
country, nowhere in the world are they.
Now, if
doing
you want to
that.
look at, maybe get an outside opinion, you can't even look at studies done by universities or people in this country. If you want to look at to get a more impartial view of, like, let's say if the flu vaccine is really effective, You got to go outside this country to see people like in the Cochrane analysis looking at what we're doing in a more non-biased sense, and we get a more impartial view to learn how relatively ineffective they are compared to the marketing we get over the airways all the day with them, and the idea that people are dying left and right, and we got to take Tamiflu, and we got to take the, you know, whatever. The point I'm making is that it's very hard for even us to know the facts because we don't have the data to be able to answer the questions accurately because the studies aren't even done. So we, you know, so it's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate.
Are there any countries in the world that have taken on this plant-based nutrition as a serious health policy? As I'm referring especially even to Brenda Davis has done a work in Marshall Island, whether some of the smaller Pacific nations or any countries indeed that's taken on this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been working, I'm sorry, but I sometimes get interrupted with like emergencies with people, but I'm not 100% sure what you're saying, but yes, I've worked with the government of Jamaica, for example, and I've been worked on their food plate and saw their, and they adopted some of their food, not their food plate from part of my work, and they're trying to advocate people eat what they grow and not take in the fast foods and the frankenfoods coming from other countries. So there are countries and small countries of the world who recognize that the healthcare, that reducing healthcare costs and protecting the health of their population from the damaging effect in the American influence. And actually, we're finding out that we're working with, you know, with people that know what's happening around the world. We're actually, we're having politicians and government and health professionals working together that are doing much more advocacy for their population to live a healthy life than goes on in this country, definitely.
I mean, if you look at a country like Germany now, in Germany, over half the population, I think 57% the last I read, consciously choose to eat 4 vegan meals a week. Now that's a major, in a place like Germany, where when I used to go to health restaurants there 40 years ago, all I got is potatoes. It's a wild shift in the right direction. And I worked with the Indian government, but again, what happens is the administrations change. And so I worked with the Egyptian under Sadat. I worked with his government. And the Irish government, when somebody came and reversed disease, who was part of it. But it's unfortunately so short-lived. Until we had a policy in place in one of these governments, nobody's done long-term serious things. And I'm probably the same with Jamaica. You go there and somebody's enthusiastic about it, somebody's voted in, and before you know it, that's out the window. But the country that does it, as Denmark has decided to be the first country that gets off the grid, which it will do in the next 30 years, is going to be the country that will lead the world in healthcare.